Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Figma for EDU monthly workshop. My name is Miggy, and I'm also joined by Alex, who's a manager on the education team, Advanced Prototyping Techniques, Figma for EDU. So let's go. We're going to begin by walking through a prototyping example in Figma and then show how it can be augmented or made better, made easier by using advanced prototyping techniques, which includes interactive components and variables. And I will break down each of these concepts if either of those words are new to you. So you see here we have two frames. The two frames are constructed with various shapes. The intention here is that we push this plus button, and then this little orange bar raises to the top and turns green. So when you are using Figma, what you're going to do is you're going to create a frame, right? You create a frame, you create a shape. It's an object that's in there, and this object will have properties. Now, when you're typically working between two frames and you're creating a prototype, you're creating a relationship between those two frames. So I have here in this file, once again, if you're just joining us, this file is available. Alex is sharing the link. You can duplicate it and use it in your Figma file. Now, you'll notice here that what I want to do is create an interaction between these two. I'm going to click on the prototype panel, and I'm going to click on this button that I have here. The prototype panel means that I'm currently in prototyping mode, and it's going to allow me to create an interaction between these two frames. I'm going to drag this over. And once again, we are just demonstrating a simple interaction, and we're going to demonstrate how advanced prototyping will be different from this concept. So you'll notice that I'm taking this arrow, I'm dragging it over here to the right, I'm creating an interaction. I'm creating an on-click interaction. So when I click on this object that I have here inside of this frame, I'm going to navigate to this other frame here, and it's basically saying when I click, I'm going to navigate to this other frame. You'll notice there's a bunch of other options in there. And then we're going to navigate over here to the end, and we're going to have this be instant. So what this is going to allow me to do is to preview this interaction. I'm going to hit play on the canvas. You'll see it creates a little flow. And when I click, it goes from one frame to the next frame, right? Pretty boring. You didn't really see too much happen. So if we want to make that a bit more so folks can understand what's happening, when we on click, we can create an animation that is a smart animation. Now, I've covered this in previous workshops. You can feel free to check them out on YouTube, the minutia of this. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to create an ease in out interaction between them both. So when I hit play, you'll see that we have an animation play out. So I can start that over again. And basically what's happening is in these two frames, I click on this object. It's nothing more than a circle, two rectangles, and I create that interaction to animate this little bar up to the next one. Now, I'm going to just drag this little flow thing off. What is going to be different is we're going to make it more advanced. Let's say instead of clicking on this little button once, we actually click on it many times, right? We're like loading that bar up. So imagine here, we want to walk through the interaction. We're going to click this button. We want to move this up by a value of 20. And then when it completes and we get to the end, we want that to turn green. So we're thinking maybe a little bit along lines of like a game mechanic. So now when I click here, to preview this, I can come up here in the top right corner of the prototyping panel, and I can choose preview. If I take a look there, I'll notice that there's a shortcut, shift space. So I can hit on that preview, can click on that preview, and now you'll notice that this prototype is a little different, right? Within a single frame, we're able to create this interaction, and we're able to have variability as I am proceeding through. Now, if we were to look at that previous interaction, In order for us to accomplish this in a more traditional way, we would need many frames in between. And instead, what we have here is we have here a button, and we have a different set of code, a different set of actions that look like code that is causing this transition. So what we're going to do today is we're going to break down how to use variables in Figma, how to use expressions, and how to use a conditional to achieve these types of interactions. So you'll see here the way that this is broken down. On mouse up is the trigger. In the previous one, we used a click. Every time the mouse up is triggered, we're setting the value, which is equal to the height of that rectangle. We're adding to it every single time. So we're adding the value by 20, and we're checking to see once it exceeds a value of 360, that it then changes the color and we set a message. I'll show you that one more time. Once again, this is just an example. You can play the example already in the file, and we're going to walk through how to make this work. I'm just going to walk through a very quick real world example of how this may relate, since you might be saying, when am I ever clicking a little plus gauge in an interface? This is commonly used for like radio button interactions. If I was to consider making out a component list where I need to keep track of which item I selected, or let's say I have many lists, and each list is kind of keeping track of its own option. So if you're creating real UI, you can use advanced prototyping to track many of those inputs that you might be including in your prototypes. Okay, so once again, these examples are in the community file that Alex is sharing in the chat. Okay, so now we're going to get down to business. Now we are going to go into the area where, if you're following along, you can go step by step along with me. We're going to talk about variables in prototypes and variables in Figma. When we talk about variables in Figma, we're talking about 4 different types of concepts. Numbers that you can add to, you can subtract to, you can multiply, you can divide. Booleans, a Boolean operation basically just states if an object is true or false. It's on or off. So Boolean is a flashlight where it's either on or it's off. A string value, I'm going to go in here. I'm just going to edit this. This is a text string. So if you think about updating text fields, if you think about updating like a text header, or changing text content on the fly in your prototype, that's what we're talking about there. And colors are colors applied to shape objects, applied to frames, applied to stroke values. We can dynamically change those color values in Figma. So when we're talking about these properties in use and we're thinking about them applied to an object that you might have on the Figma canvas, imagine you draw a rectangle. I'm going to press the R key. I'm going to draw a rectangle, and I'm going to click on the design panel here. So this object, right, is a rectangle. And here under the design panel on the right, there's a number of properties. We have width property, we have height property, we have whether or not it is visible, we have its color value. All of these can be modified using those values, using those variables. So here with this rectangle, we have a height value of 280, this width value of 400, right? 400 units wide. We have a color here that's representing the way that you see it, a text string that is populating this text box, this text field, and we can toggle whether or not an object is visible. So if you want to think about the relationships between those values and the object that you see on the screen, these are the things that we can modify and we can change to create more interactivity. So now what we're looking at here is beginning to think about on this slide how we can modify these things. How can we update these things? I'm going to delete this 0. You'll see that we already have 2 little objects here on the stage. And I'm just going to start fresh. The reason that I deleted this is I want to show you how to add it. So I'm going to press the T key. It's the text tool. I'm going to draw a text field. Here, I could change the size of it. I'm going to have it be pretty large, let's say about 200. So once again, I'm going to type in the number 0. So what I've done is I've pressed the T key, the text tool. I've drawn a text field. I'm going to type in the number 0. Over here on the right, I'm going to come over under the typography panel, and I'm going to align this to the center. I'm also going to align this to the middle. So here on this frame, I have this text field. I've typed in the number 0. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable that can change this value. Okay. So once again, we've discussed the topic of variables, numbers, booleans, strings, and colors. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a number variable. To do so, I'm going to click on the canvas. Canvas is right here, anywhere that's outside of my frame. I'm going to click on the canvas. I'll be here on the frame. Now, when I do so, and I look over here in the right panel, there's a local variables option. I'm going to click on the local variables option, and it's going to bring up my variables panel. This variables panel is going to be your way to create these data sets that allow you to control the properties that you're seeing on the canvas. So when I click here, there's different collections. So I have different variable collections for each one of my examples. So if you're in the file, you should see these as well. I'm going to click down and choose the variables examples. I'll show you that one more time. Clicked on the canvas. I come over here to the right where it says local variables. Here are the variables. I can choose the variables examples collection. At this point, there are no variables. So in order to begin to work with them, you need to create one. What we're going to do is we're going to create a variable to populate this text field, and that variable is actually going to be a number. So we're going to create variable, and we're going to see these options right here. We have color, we have number, string, Boolean. We're going to pick that number value. And right now it's a value of 0. So I'm going to change this to be a different number. I'm going to change that to be 120. So I'm back on the canvas. I'm going to select this text field. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create that relationship between the variable that was in that panel, right? So when I click on the canvas, local variables, they're right here. And then I'm going to click on this text field. I'm going to come over here to the typography panel, and I'm going to click apply variable. When I apply variable, it's going to give me all of the ones that I have up here. I have that number variable that I created called number. We could have given it a better value. And there it is. It's populating that text field. I can give that text field just a bit more width. And I can censor it here on the stage. And now to see the relationship between them both, I'm going to click on that local variables panel again. And you'll see that as I change this number, as I go up and down, I could see it updating in that text field. So what I'm doing is I'm applying that value here to this text field, but then any changes I make to the variable in this data set, so if I change that back to 120, you'll see it reflected in the text field. So now that we have that there, what we can do is begin to think about how we might iterate upon it. We can add to it, we can subtract from it. I didn't use auto layout, not very mindful, not very demure. That's cool. I mean, right now we don't need auto layout per se. So here we go. So for this text field, if I just wanted to expand, what I could do is I could set it to auto width. So we don't necessarily need auto layout, but as long as we set auto width, we should be good. I could also set its center constraint. So if we update the value, we can apply it from the center. So if I type in the number, it's going to grow from the middle. So what I've done is I selected my text field. I've come over here. I've selected center. I've selected auto width. And I've opened up my constraints panel and have it set to center, or I can just align the object to the center, and that'll also work. So now if we want to prototype this, where the plus adds to the value, the subtracts from the value, we can go to our prototype panel. And you can already see I have some existing prototypes there. I'm going to select them and I'm going to delete them. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to go to the interaction. I'm going to press delete. So I'll show you that one more time. If you see those interactions already there, we can delete that one. And we can delete the other one just by selecting it. This is in the prototype panel. So auto width, when you select the text field, you'll notice it under layout, and you're going to choose right here, auto width for that text field. So we're in prototype mode. We select the object that we want to create an interaction. I can come up over here in the top right while I'm in prototype mode, click plus. And here I can create an interaction. So the trigger right now will be on click. So when I click on that button, we want it to increase that number. So here we go. Let's click on action. And you'll notice a number of different options here. These are the ones where you're going to be dealing with those values. You're adding to them, you're subtracting them, you can multiply them. So if you're making like a cart checkout experience, you can use this to keep track of items, inventory, price. But for now, we're just going to add and subtract from this text field. I'm going to press set variable, and it's going to give me an option. Which variable am I setting? And if you look down here, variables example number. So if I just type in the number, I will see it pop up. I can click it there. And so basically, I'm following these step by step. I'm clicking on the trigger. I'm setting the variable. What is the variable that I'm setting? And what am I going to set it to? So if I say I want to add number to number, so what I can do is I can choose number and I can write an expression. So if I take a look at my window right now, it says I'm setting number to number. I can add to it. I can subtract to it from it. I can multiply it. I can divide it. Let's choose addition. And then I could put in any value I wish. If I want to iterate up by a value of 50, right? You can see then that instruction take place in this panel. On click, I set the variable number plus 50. So we can test this out. Plus, right? It's adding to those values. Now we want to create that same interaction and we want to subtract from it. I'm going to select the other button that we have here. Make sure there's no other interactions on it. So if there was one on it, feel free, you can delete it from this panel. We're going to add a new on trigger, on click. We're going to set variable. We're going to type in number. It's our number variable. And this time we're going to take the number and we're going to subtract. How much did we add? We added 50. Now we're going to subtract 50. So now on the subtract, you'll notice this little icon shows up right here. It demonstrates visually when you're in prototype mode that that icon has an interaction, or that button has an interaction. So on click, set variable, and we're subtracting 50. So I can select that frame. We can come over here. We can preview it. Once again, the shortcut for that is Shift Space. And now you'll see I'm adding 50 and I'm subtracting 50. So previously in Figma, before variables, in order to have an interaction like this, you would need many, many frames to demonstrate the addition or the subtraction. So imagine if you're creating an interaction where you're adding quantity or removing quantity, this is going to come in very helpful. The next concept that we're going to work with here is going to be text strings. So you'll notice that there's already some interactions on these. I think these are like left over. So we want to make sure we remove them. I left them on there on purpose because I do want you to clear out those interactions. I want you to, if you're starting over, if you're copying, pasting from somewhere else, I might have copy pasted from somewhere else. If you copy pasting from somewhere else, you want to make sure you're starting fresh. So I selected both of those. Once again, I'm in prototype mode. I've deleted the previous interaction. Now, let's go ahead and I'm actually going to change this text. I'm going to press the T key. I'm going to say pesto and Moodang, right? And so I have these two buttons. So what I want to do is I want to update this text field here. When I click on pesto, it'll say pesto. When I click on Moodang, I can then choose Moodang. So the first thing we're going to do, we need to create another variable. I'm going to click on the canvas. So here we are in text strings. So if you see the whole presentation, we're on text strings. I'm going to click on the canvas. I'm going to go to the design panel. By the way, to easily switch between design and prototype, press Shift E. Shift E will swap between design and prototype. So in design mode, I'm going to click on local variables. Here, I'm going to create another variable. So once again, this is our data set. We're in our variables examples collection. I'm going to create a string variable. I'm going to call this, favorite. I was going to say meme, but favorite, meme animal, favorite meme animal, pesto or Moodang. And we're going to put in an initial string value. So I'm going to say choose. So once again, a text string is just plain text English. It's a common word. They're often referred to in code with quotation marks. So now that that is there, what I can do is I can come down here and this text field I can associate with this variable favorite meme animal. I'm going to come over here to my typography window. I'm going to click on the variables icon. You see that when I hover over it, it says apply variable. By the way, if you're looking at your interface and wondering what some of the fields are, you can always go to this ellipsis menu and oops, right here. I'm sorry, this little drop down with the percentage and choose property labels. When you turn on property labels, you'll better see what every field is. So you'll see letter spacing, line height. So here we want to apply variable and we called it fave meme animal. There we go. We choose it and you can see that it is now updating this field with what we have is the variable. So if I change that value to hello world, you will see it then update. Here I am using auto layouts, whoever called me out earlier. So I'm going to change that back to choose. And let's make these buttons just populate that field. So I'm going to head over to prototype mode. I'm going to select the button on my canvas. I should have no interactions here. If you have an interaction there, you can delete them. I'm going to click plus. And with this interaction on click, I'm going to choose set variable. And here, let me move this up a little bit, move that over. Here we go. I'm going to set that variable, which variable? It's going to be favorite meme animal. And we're going to choose a value of pesto. Right. And you'll notice that once I write it, it's putting it in quotations because that is the way that you're going to express that it is a string value. So if you're writing code and you put in plain language text, you put it in quotations to designate it a string. So now that should work. And what I can do is I can actually save myself some time by coming over to these interactions. I'm going to click to the left of it. You'll see it highlighted. I'll show you that one more time. Click on the object. I go to the prototype panel. I click to the left where it says interactions. I can see it highlighted. Now I'm going to press Command C or Control C if you're in Windows. I'm going to copy that interaction. I'm going to click this other button and I'm going to hit paste. Now you'll see that I've copied the interaction from one button and pasted it on to another. So that's going to save me a significant amount of time. All of this is going to be the same. I'm just changing pesto to Moodang. Oops. Moodang. And there we go. So now when I click on this window and press Shift Spacebar to preview the prototype that I've created, I could choose pesto or Moodang, pesto or Moodang, pesto or Moodang. So once again, to recap, we did a set variable, we applied a string value, and once we had that interaction in place, we were able to copy that interaction under the interactions pane, select it to the left of it, highlight it in blue, copy and paste, and we're good to go. Next, let's talk about color. So we can use prototyping to change the color of shapes, objects, text, anything that is applied with a color value. So once again, I have here my data table, my variables table. I'm going to create a new variable here. This variable is going to be a color variable. I'm going to call it robot face, right? So we got our little robot here, and let's set robot face. I can set that color. I can choose the eyedropper. I can click the robot on its face, and you'll see its hexadecimal value here represented. Now what I can do is I'm going to make sure that this robot is set to those colors. So once again, if you're in the prototype panel, we're going to move back over to the design panel, press Shift E to swap back and forth easily with your keyboard. And now that we're in this pane, we can go to the fill and we're going to set that variable. So I'm going to click on fill. And here it's a little different. You're going to go to libraries. And here in libraries, you're going to type in the value robot face. So robot face. As soon as I type in robot, I can see the variable that I have. I can see the color that it represents, and I can click on it. Now, when I click on that shape, I will see the variable associated with it instead of the color itself. We can do that for the face as well. So click on the fill. We're going to go to libraries. We're going to type in search. We're going to type in the name of the variable that we're looking for, and we're going to click robot face, and there we go. Now, what we're going to do is have each one of these buttons update the face of the robot. We're going to go to prototype mode. We're here in prototype mode. We have our color, right? As we go through these, it's going to get more and more familiar. And then we're going to build up to like the next big concept that you can use a lot. I promise it's going to be great. We're going to click on interactions. On click, we're going to set the interaction of set variable. So once again, we're setting the variable. We're going to set robot face variable, and we're going to change the robot face variable. We're going to eyedropper this pink color that we're working with. So on click, we're going to set robot face to pink. Once again, we can copy and paste that interaction. So click on the interactions panel, hit Command C, hit Command V, Command V, Command V. You'll notice that when I'm clicked here, each one of these now has that interaction associated with it. We can click and choose a different color. So I can make that blue. I can make this one, click on the eyedropper. We're going to make that green, right? And this one's going to go back to robot face's original color. And there it is. So now you'll see each one of these has a click interaction associated with it and pulling in the color. So I'm going to click on monthly workshop, this frame. I'm going to hit Shift Spacebar, and now green, blue, pink, and gray. So you can see how as you build in complexity, you can start to adjust and modify like the colors of shapes if you have like a scene, something that you're working on, or dynamic palettes being applied. Later on, we're going to talk about setting a variable mode. So those of you familiar with variable modes or swapping out those modes, I can show you how to use prototyping to swap a color mode to change a whole library of colors on an object. So right now we're just doing one color by itself, but later we're going to touch upon variable modes. The example's a little bit lower down, where we're going to set a whole set of colors in one sweep. Next, we have Boolean operations. Boolean operations are true or false. Effectively here, I have a little switch. So when I preview this, I can turn it off and on. I can turn it off and on. This is a simple interactive component. We're going to make some additional interactive components in just a bit. You can check out also some of my previous workshops where I will use a drag interaction to create an interactive component such as this. But what we want to do here is we want to set a true or false value to set the visibility of Mudang. So Mudang is either going to be here or Mudang is going to not be there. So we're going to set the visibility of that layer to turn it on or off using the Boolean value. So Boolean values on and off. We're going to click on the canvas. We're going to go to the design panel. We're going to click on local variables. And here in the variables example, I'm going to create another variable. And this is going to be that Boolean variable. And if you look at the icon, it resembles the little switch that we have. So I'm going to turn on the Boolean and we're going to set it to true. So the Boolean value, we're going to call this the Mudang Boolean, right? Mudang is going to be first set to true. And then we're going to apply this value to the switch as well as Mudang, right? So this layer, we're going to apply the value here first. So we're going to head on over to the appearance panel. So once again, we're going to set this switch off and it's going to make Mudang disappear. We're going to set it on and it's going to make her pop back up. So by clicking on this layer, you're going to come over here to appearance. This one's a little bit hidden. You're going to right click on that layer and that's going to let you set a Boolean variable to that layer. So true means the layer is visible and false means the layer is hidden. If you don't have a Boolean variable in your file, you won't see this little panel. So you must have a Boolean variable in your file to see it. So we can choose the Mudang, right? It's currently set to true. And now what we're going to do is we're going to set that value to this switch here. So this is an interactive component. We're going to cover that concept in just a minute, but you'll notice that here for this component, there is a switch on off and we can set that to the Mudang value, right? So both of these objects has that Boolean set. Here it has two different states. It has a false state and it has a true state. If I click on this component definition, let's call this switch, you'll see that it has true or false state. And here this appearance has a true or false state. Now that they're both set up, we can play this. And when I drag this off, Boolean, drag it on, drag it off, drag it on, drag it off. So I see someone in the chat says they can't right click on it. If you don't have a Boolean value, like if you haven't created a variable with a Boolean value, you won't be able to right click on that eyeball. Like you won't be able to change it. Once you've associated the variable, once that variable has been set, then it is now on and it will allow you to swap that on and off. So when I go here, you can see I could turn it off and I could turn it on. I could turn it off and turn it on. Oh, correct. If you have a one button mouse, you can press control click. So you can press control and left click on your mouse if you do not see that. Yes, it does work in the old UI. In the old UI, you should see the appearance panel, and there should still be an eyeball that will allow you to set that value. We will be going over modes in just a moment. All right, so what we've just done is we've covered a number of different values. So make sure the Boolean value is applied to the layer itself. The one thing that I will note is that here there's already an interaction on this this dragger here. So if I was to take off the interactions, what I can do is I will set this circle, I'll create an interaction there. So on drag, change to, and it's going to change to the true state, right? And then here, I'm going to drag it over here. So then we have on drag, we're going to change to the off state. We're going to make interactive components in just a minute. And that's basically our next concept, where an interactive component. So if you're unfamiliar with the concept of components in Figma, components are elements that are reusable. So if I was to take a look, I actually have a page full of components right here. Components are elements that you will use to construct an interface. They could be a switch, they could be a button. When they're made into components, they're reusable, and you can find them in the assets panel. So when I have local assets and I have some existing components, I can easily just drag them out and use them again and again. Now, interactive components are different in that they allow you to have their own embedded sort of set of interactions and actions associated with it. So what we're going to talk about now is the building of an interactive component and the concept that we just kind of explored with Mudang, where we have this two-way binding, or you can see the binding of the value affecting something else, right? So we're going to use strings or Booleans. I should put in here or Booleans. Booleans. There we go. To control interactive components. Just updating this, don't mind me. So we're going to use strings or Booleans to control interactive components and also introduce the concept of two-way binding. I'm going to explain this concept, but what it's going to allow you to do is use interactivity in a way. And people are asking me this all the time, where they have an interaction over here, but they wanted to control something over here, right? So they have two completely different components and they want them to interact. They want them to update each other in a very specific way. So I'll show you the finished piece and then I'll show you how we get there. So here's the finished piece where we have a simple gallery. And when I click, it goes to a different state, right? And we actually have multiple of these galleries on one page, right? So this one's like it's a little puppy gallery, right? Got like cute little adorable puppy dogs. But then here, what we're doing is we're using two separate interactive components to control one another. So here I can click on this image and it also updates the position tracker, right? And that's what we're referring to as two-way binding, where this controls the image, but then the image also controls the navigation, right? And so we're going to explore that concept, and we're going to explore that concept with interactive components. So once again, interactive components, Booleans or strings. Here we go. I'll show you how I create this from scratch, and I'll walk you through the steps of making first the navigation. So I will start off by using the ellipse tool. The ellipse tool is the circle tool. Down here, you could press the O key. I'm going to draw an ellipse. So there we go. I have one ellipse. There we go. There's one. Voila. I'm going to duplicate it. So I'm going to press Command D and I make a copy of itself. And there we go. We now have two of them. I'm going to hit Command D again. We now have three. I'm going to hit Command D again. We now have four. Okay. So once again, I started off with one. I duplicate Command D or Control D. I move that over, Command D, Command D. So this is going to be our four different states. Now we can rename them. So you'll see ellipse 1, 2, 3, 4. I can press Command R and Control R if you're on Windows, and that'll allow me to rename all four. So I'm just going to say, button and click on number. And what that's going to do, it's just going to name them to button 1, 2, 3, 4. So you'll see button 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll show you that one more time. So I have those four circles. I select them. I press Command R, Control R if you're on Windows. I get this rename dialog, and I'm going to type in button or let's do nav. Nav might be better. NAV. And then I choose down for the number. And that just names those layers. Naming those layers is going to be really important. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put them in this like little, we're going to give them a little space. We're going to give a little nav UI. I'm going to press Shift A, right? Shift A turns on auto layout. And what we're going to do is apply some padding all the way around it. So auto layout is just keeping them all together. And over here on the right, we're going to go to that padding panel. We're going to apply padding to everything at once. So here comes another shortcut. If I hold down the Command key, it's going to be the Control key on Windows. When I click on that field, it'll let me add the padding of everything at the same time. Really cool. I love doing this. So I type in 20 and we have padding all around it. Let's give it some fill. So I'm going to click fill. And we're going to just darken that up a little bit. Let's make it a color to differentiate this from everything else. And now to get those rounded corners, what we want to do is come down here to the appearance panel. There's the corner radius. We can just drag that all the way to the right and we'll get these nice rounded corners. So this is going to be roughly what our UI is going to look like. Now, what we want to do is we want to create 4 different states for it, right? So we're going to do 1 state, 2 state, 3 state, 4 state. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to make this into a component. So you'll notice the option in the top right, create component. The shortcut key for that, I never remember the shortcut key for that one. It's Option Command K. I think it's Alt Control K if you're on Windows. I feel like that's a designer confessional that I don't remember the shortcut key for this, but that's okay. I'm going to click on that. So we now have a component and we just need to make sure that, it has a name. Right now it's frame 17, but we'll give it a name in just a moment. So we have one component, but we want to create a series of variants, right? For each state. So the first one, the second one, the third one, and the fourth one. We're going to select it. We're going to come over here. You're going to see this new icon that says add variant, right? And so what each one of these are is a different variant of that first component. So I'm going to add a variant. See, now we have 2. Now I'm going to add in another one. Now we have 3. I'm going to add in another one. There's a little plus icon underneath that allows us to keep adding those variants. So now we have all of those. And then I can create a state for each one. So let's highlight this one as, here we go. Let's make that as blue. I'm going to command click on this one, right? And I could set it as that same color of blue. I'm going to command click on this one. I'm going to set it as the same color of blue. And I'm going to command click on this one and set it as the same color of blue. So once we have those set up, it's important that we name each of these variants. What we're going to be doing is we're setting this up, but we need to be mindful of the name. The name is of each one of those variants is how we're going to control it with prototyping. So I'm going to click over here and we can call the first one the property. So the property is going to be nav state. It's the current state of the navigation. Then we can click on this little drop down and we can name them all. So this edit variant property, when I hover over it, I can see each one that we're naming. So this first one, I'm going to call this, let's call it, see, image one. Or let's change that up. Let's make sure it's different than the examples on the canvas. Nav1, Nav2, Nav3, and Nav4. Oops, I have two Nav3s. You don't want to do that. Let's do that again. Here, sometimes when it breaks, you just have to go and name it here. Just double click nav state 4. Okay, so click on the component set. You'll see those properties over here. Let's give the name a proper name, so we'll call this navigation. Cool. So if I bring this off the frame, you'll see we have navigation. When we select it, we come over here, we can see its name, and we have each of those states. Each of those states is going to be important because we're going to create a variable that's going to track the ones. We're going to use a string variable to say nav1, nav2, nav3, nav4. Now comes the fun part. We're going to create this as an interactive component. So when we click on each of these buttons, it goes to the respective one. I'm going to duplicate this here because I'm going to show you how I do this twice. It's going to have a really cool shortcut that's going to allow you to prototype this very, very fast. So I'll do it once and then I'll do it again. So right here, I'm going to command click on this first option, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the Q key. The Q key is multi-edit, and it allows you to edit the variants all at the same time. So when I press Q, you'll see all of these objects are selected. So when I select any of these, you see that all of their cousins in the other variants are all selected. So now when I go to prototype, what I can do is I can say, hey, this is all going to go to the first one, right? On click, change to nav1, great. Now I can click on this second one and all the second buttons are going to go to the second one. I can click on the third one. All of the buttons are going to go to the third one. And I can click on the fourth one. All the buttons are going to go to the fourth one. Let me show you how this works. And then we're going to walk through it one more time. So if I create an instance of that and I put that on my canvas here, you'll see now that when oh, that didn't work. Let me try that one more time. Let me copy that and paste. And let's click here. Oh no, I think I broke something. Let's see. That's all right. Whenever we break things, there's an opportunity to fix them. Okay, cool. So let's see what's broken here. All right, let's go back to prototype. I'm going to go here, click Q. They're all selected. They should be navigating there. Let's take a look. On click, change to, for all intents and purposes, it should be working. I'm going to just rename this as 2, just in case they're getting confused. Could be my bad for trying to be clever. Let's see. Will this work now? No. Huh. All right. Let's try this one more time. Unique navigation. I'm going to go to my assets panel. Let's pull it in from here. And let's see if that works. It's usually so. Oh, there we go. Now it works. Okay, cool. So this works, and I'm able to click on each one. So the thing that I did different was I just made sure that I pulled it from the assets panel. I think copying it in the prototype mode kind of did me dirty. So let's see, I'm going to copy it from there and paste it here, and that should work. There you go. That works. Cool. So you don't want to copy and paste while in prototype mode. It's going to do weird things. All right. So I'll walk you through that process one more time. I'm going to delete that one and I'll show you. And if you're looking for an example of it completed, you'll see it over here. The finished example is already lined up. So just so y'all know, we're going to probably go about 5 to 10 minutes over just to account for the time in the intros. So we will be going past the hour. All right. So here I'm in prototype mode and I have all of these objects. We want them to navigate to one another. So I'm going to select that first object in that list, and I'm going to press the Q key so they're all selected. Now, when I create this prototype, I'm going to have them all, right? So notice when I drag, right? I'm dragging it, and I'm going to have it go to that first one. It'll snap and stick to that first one. That's great. Now I'm going to click on the second object. We're still in that multi-edit mode, so they'll be all selected. We're going to drag out an arrow and we're going to stick it to that second one. It's kind of fun. Move that arrow around, feel comfortable with it. And I'm going to drag it there to that second one. Now we're going to click on that third object. Notice we're still multi-editing, so they're all selected. And this is by pressing the Q key in the component set. Now you can see I can drag it here. They're all going there. And this fourth one, we're going to go there. So now that navigation too, we'll look at our assets panel. We could drag it in here. And you'll see that when we play this, we'll see those interactions work. Now, just so you understand where we are in building this out, we're also going to, I'm going to move this over here. Let's just move this over here. There we go. And also in building this out, we're going to have another interactive component that just has 4 rectangles of different colors, of different names. These names are going to correspond to the names in the navigation. So in the navigation, we have nav1, nav2, nav3, nav4. We are going to create 4 images to be in our gallery. So I'm going to press the R key. I'm going to draw 1. I'm going to give it a color just so we can see it. I'm going to round its corners out. So this is just a rectangle. Now I'm going to create it as a component. So we'll call this gallery view. And we're going to do the same thing that we did, right? We're just repeating our actions. I'm going to create this as a variant. So we have another variant, 1, 2, and we're going to create a third one, 3, and 4. So now we have our 4 variants, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that we have this set up, I could actually show you another way to make these. Here, let me show you one more way to make these. So I could also just draw that first one. I can apply the corner radius. I can duplicate it. So I have 2. I can duplicate it. So I have 3. I can duplicate it. So I have 4. Another way to make this is I can select them all. I can come over here to this more actions menu with them selected and create a component set. This will automatically create them each as their own component and put them into the component set. So you have the entire, all of those variants. So we're going to create component set and it's made for us. We're going to call this gallery view. And once again, we need to name these. So we want nav1, nav2, nav3, nav4. So here you'll see they're called rectangle 30, 29, 28, 27. Let's select them all. Same interaction that we did before. Command R, Control R if you're on Windows, and type in nav and number down, right? Nav, number down. And they're now named nav4, nav3, nav2, nav1. Okay. And for us to see the difference, we can change the color of those. So you can see that there can be a little bit of setup involved, depending on the type of interaction that you want to create. What I'm trying to demonstrate here is that you can create two interactive components and control them both with a variable. So once we have this set up, we can do so much with it with the variables. So here, I'm just going to choose these colors so they match up. So now in my assets panel, I'm going to take the gallery view that I have. I'm going to put it in there. And I'm going to take that navigation that I created. And what we're going to do is we're just going to control the current states. And by the way, one more thing, we're going to prototype these. So when you click on one, it goes to the next one, right? So here, I'm going to drag one to the next, on click, change to, that's great. Click, drag, and click and drag to the first one. So show you that one more time. I can delete those arrows. I could delete that arrow, and I could delete that arrow. What I'm doing is I'm creating an interaction, an on-click interaction. So each gallery item then progresses to its neighbor. And so this one will then go back to the beginning. So when we play this, right, this one's cycling through all the colors, and this one is going through its own colors, but they're independent. What we want them to do is to match up. So we're going to set a variable to both of them. And once we set that variable up, they're going to respond to that variable and they're going to control each other. So we're going to go back to our design panel. We're going to go to local variables. And here, for example, we're going to create another variable. This is going to be a string. And we're just going to call this gallery example 1. And the string value for that is going to be nav space 1. So what we need them to be is named. Oh, this one's not named properly. Say file. Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't name these. Let's select the. All right, cool. Yeah, I didn't name these properly. That's my bad. This should be prop value. All right, so yeah, I got to name them prop equals the value. So it should be prop 1 equals nav. I think that's how that works. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so this should be prop 4 equals nav 4. Yep. Let me just double check with how this is named. Yeah, nav state. Yep. All right, cool. So it should just be here. Prop equals nav 4. And this is really good debugging exercise. So prop equals nav 3. Prop equals nav 2. And prop equals nav 1. So now I should see nav 1, nav 2, nav 3. I also want to rename these to not have that extra number there. Let's get rid of that number. I don't want two decimals. I want it to be easy. And let's see, nav 1. There you go. Okay, so nav 1, nav 2, nav 3, right? So if we change it, nav 1, nav 2, nav 3. And here, right, we should see nav 1, nav 2, nav 3. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable that's going to control them both. So here I click prop. There's the little variable setter. And we're going to call this gallery example 1. And then here we're going to click on this and we're going to choose gallery example 1. And now that they're bound with that single variable, we can control it. So we actually didn't need to create any new sort of like advanced prototyping conditional, we could easily kind of move between those. So it's all in the strings. Yes, it's all in the strings. Now, if you want multiple of these same things here, right? I could duplicate this. I can create a new variable here. So let's create gallery example 2. And this can start at a different value. It could start at nav 3 and make sure you put it in correctly. So now this set over here can be different, and I can go to the property, I could break it, and I could say, go to gallery example 2, and now it'll be on the third one. And same thing here, we could break it, and now it'll be on the third one. And so by virtue of their own, by them navigating their own states, right? Those 4 states, it's updating the variable as well. Now, if you're working and you're confused by a variable that doesn't quite work, you can always press T, draw in a text field. So here I could have like a little text field. Let me set this as enter. Let's put in 48 and a line height of 100%. Line height of 100% and 48. Okay, so I can have a text field here, and I can bind this text field to right here. So in the typography panel, I can click on this value, and I could say, okay, I want you to tell me what is the current value, right? I can duplicate that here, and I could say, hey, I want you to be bound to gallery example 1. Oops. And we're good. And it tells me, and it's going to update. Oh, that was weird. It's got some weird smart animate in there. I think because they're named the same. So
Hey,
yeah.
Miggy, this is Alex. I just want to let you know you have some really, really good questions in the Q&A portion. So before we wrap up, I would definitely love to save at least 5 minutes for questions because you got some good ones in there.
Okay. All right, cool. I have one last thing because there was a question about modes earlier. I'm just going to answer that really quickly. So this is pretty quick. This example is already set up. So basically, you can swap modes. What modes are is if you go into the variables panel and you go to the modes example, modes are sort of alternate expressions of like color sets or number sets or values. So we use modes if you think of light mode and dark mode. So light mode, I have the background color to white, I have the text to black, I have neutral values. So I have a light mode, a dark mode, and an orange mode. And so what's cool here is that you can easily create a prototype where you swap the mode of your design. So if I select my design here and I go to the appearance panel and I set dark mode, my design goes into dark mode. I could set it to orange mode, my design goes to orange mode. I can go to light mode. So that is set when you apply the colors to your designs. And now in prototypes, this is a newer feature where you can create an interaction. So on click, set variable mode, I could set this white one with light mode. I can set the same thing here. I'm just going to copy paste to save time. I'm going to set this to modes example and dark mode and paste here and set this to modes example orange mode. So now that I have that set up, I can click and oh, that broke. Let's try that again. Let me just delete this. Make sure this is working. Click set variable mode. Great. I'm going to copy this, paste it in here. Let's move it all the way back up to the top. We're going to take this object, go to the design panel, set it as absolute positioning, press the K key, scale it down, put it in the center, and this should now work. No, of course, the last thing I want to show breaks. Let me just double check one more time. So click set variable mode. And let me just, oh, I know what happened because I set it to light mode. It must be set to auto. So make sure it's set to auto and now it will work. So now dark mode, orange mode, right? So I can go ahead and I can now apply the different mode. So if you have something where you have a whole class of colors you want to change, you could do that. Let's hit up the Q&A. Is it possible to have multiple interactions like hover state on these two buttons? You can have multiple interactions. You can have a hover state and a click state. All you need to do is when you're working with the object, go into prototype mode, and then you can add multiple interactions. So you can have a drag, a click, a hover, and then each one of those can have their own set of interactions that are applied. So you can see here, hover, drag, click, and then I could just as easily remove those interactions. So that was a fantastic question. Are there negative variables? If so, negative 50. Yes, there. You can go down with negative variables. So if you continue to move down, it will go negative 50. That is correct. Are there any ways to use expressions when defining variables too? You can't currently use expressions when you define a variable, only in prototyping when you're adjusting it. So you can't say like 2 times another variable. You can alias variables though. So if I was to be working on a variable, if I create another variable here that is a color, I can actually reference another variable here. So you can actually alias certain types of variables and reference another variable itself. But you can't currently use expressions. But that is a fantastic question. It's actually very highly requested feature here at Figma. Is it possible to create two separate interactions on one object, a drag and a click? Yes, you can have a drag and a click. However, there's going to be an order of operations where the first one to like change something, if it overrides the click, then the click won't happen. So just be mindful of the order of operations. Sometimes you put something, if you switch to navigate to another page, but you have another interaction that takes place after the first one, you're gonna miss that in the set. So just be mindful of that. With the nested page control circle, is there a way to use variables to progress the states without having to create 4 variants? So you can there are ways to do such things, but you're going to realize that with variant states, it's probably easier as opposed to it's easier to control one variable than to control like 5. Right. Because if you have a page control state where you're setting 3 to off and 1 to on, then you're just going to have many, many more actions. And it's actually going to be more complicated than if you just visually create it on the canvas. Is there a way to reorder variable collections? I really have a hard time. So I know that one of the most requested features at Figma is just better organization and maintenance of variables, being able to reorder in modes. The one thing that I can say is, yes, we've heard a lot of this feedback, and it is a priority at Figma to have better control over how you're working with collections and such. So right now, your collections are currently in alphabetical order. So if you change the naming convention of your collections, that will give you more control over how you can set those up. Thank you. Fantastic question. Last one. How are the labels showing in the right panel? Okay, so to show your labels in the right panel, all you need to do is, so you'll notice right now I have them. If you click on the zoom view options, under view options, there's an option called property labels that will let you enable or disable the property labels. So feel free to go ahead, try that out. Hopefully that will help you better navigate the design panel. So thank you once again. Thank you, Alex, for joining us. Remember, we do these once a month. Next month, we're going to be talking about using layout grids in Figma and Figma slides. So you're not going to want to miss that. So we're going to be talking about grids, margins, gutters. If you're a graphic design head or you want a better layout, we're going to be talking all about that in Figma. So thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Alex.